Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Once again, big welcome. It's really a delight to have you all here. We're excited to see what we all have to learn from each other today. I wanted to start off the morning by sharing some thoughts about what I see and what we see at RightScale as the state of the cloud, because it really sets the context for the situation that we're all in as we're here in early June of 2012 in this evolving marketplace. And it sets the framework for, I think, how we should think about the possibilities that are ahead of us. So I want to share three observations about what we think are the big picture headline, marquee headlines about the state of infrastructure cloud computing today. The first one is that IaaS is dominating IT thinking about new projects. This is a market that's been doubling every year for many years now. It looks like the growth is going to continue to be very strong. In terms of all the layers of cloud computing, it's in many ways the most innovative, I think, even though it's the lowest level. And it's attracted the most attention and the most development. We've seen it mature quite a bit over the last 6 years. It's matured in terms of the SLAs that are offered. It's matured in terms of the degree and the quantity of web services contained within infrastructure as a service that are offered, the terms and conditions offered by suppliers, etc. So this is a very significant and maturing technology that we're all operating on. It's something that Gartner has called the way we do computing, and what IDC has called the third platform. So it's here to stay, and it's really the way that we have to think about what I call the new IT moving forward. As I took a step back and to repeat something that Josh said, from day one, we've focused as a company on those customers and partners who wanted to do something in infrastructure cloud today, starting from 2007 till now. And so really our customers have been among the leaders and the pioneers in innovating on infrastructure as a service. And you can see here that many of them are household names. They're globally renowned companies. They range in size. You range in size from startups to SMBs, small and medium enterprises, all the way up to multinational global corporations across a whole variety of industries and across many different types of applications that you're using infrastructure cloud for. In fact, the apps that you've developed are one of the most fun parts of working at RightScale. We get to see these incredible apps and services created on our platform that range everything, just off the top of my head, from, for example, a mobile telephony service in China, a hospitality reservation service in China, to biopharma, drug discovery and R&D, to traditional software companies SaaSifying their offerings and delivering them software as a service, both direct to customers and through their entire network of partners and sub-ISVs, if you will. Almost every shape and size of game from social games to other kinds of games on the internet, all the way through to promotional marketing websites. Sites that we've seen highlighted on 60 Minutes, on Oprah, all the way through to one that was offering free chocolate throughout America. And that got quite a bit of traffic. That was a big scaling event. So lots of amazing apps, and we're really blessed as a company, as I see it, to work in partnership with you as customers and companies that are innovating in the cloud. So what have you helped us achieve? What have you helped us drive towards? Well, one of the stats and metrics that we've quoted since early days is the number of servers launched, and we're now over 4 million servers launched. We do track that metric because, from our point of view, it kind of captures one of the key characteristics of infrastructure as a service, which is through an API, you can make a call and launch a server. 5 minutes later, it's running, and you can run it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 5 years. So the launchability and the agility of accessing resources, key characteristic of infrastructure as a service. So just to give you a sense of what 4 million servers means, at today's rate, we're launching a new server about, on average, every 20 seconds. That means that throughout the length of the conference today, we'll launch over 1,000 servers on RightScale on behalf of customers. And that's not counting lunch. You can take lunch off too. So what's the other way to look at sort of the power that you're helping drive on the platform? It's this graph. This is a graph that we look at, which is steady state CPU power under management. And you can see it starts way back in 06 and goes all the way through today, basically. Growing very fast. There's a little phenomenon around Q4 that actually, if you go backward, you'll see that every year. It's of course a characteristic of the retail business, but that's a steep growing curve. And one interesting anecdote about that is some of you may remember way back from April 2008, our customer, very early customer, still a great customer of ours, Animoto, ran a Facebook plugin promotion where you could email and share one of your videos created on Animoto with friends, and they could create their own. It spawned a scaling event that went from 50 to 3,500 servers in just 3 days. And if you look back on the graph, the notable thing is you can't even really see that. It's just a blip in terms of the overall scale of the total CPU power that's under management today. So really pretty impressive total there. When we ask ourselves, what is driving all this consumption on top of infrastructure as a service? We run a survey once a year to all of our customers, to all of the users of our free edition, and people who receive our newsletter, etc. In other words, folks interested in cloud computing. And we ask them, what's important to you? What are you thinking about? What are you planning? What matters? And one of the interesting stats, and I think it's the reason behind all of this consumption, is what we call in large terms agile IT. And the interesting part about this, we all have heard for a long time, many years, about agility and cost reduction and scalability and things like that. And the question has almost always been phrased, what's more important to you, right? Well, the results are here are pretty clear. They're all important. So the conclusion we're seeing is that you want it all. And really you can get all of that out of infrastructure as a service, and that's what's driving this consumption. You get agility, you get scalability, and you get cost reduction. And that's what's driving this incredible consumption. Second big point that we're observing is that the universe of options available to you is really exploding. There's a breathtaking array of choices that you have today, greater than ever, for infrastructure as a service, across service providers who are providing infrastructure as a service, both public and private, across the constituent web services that are offered within those offerings, different SLAs, different geographical distribution of those platforms. So across many fronts, there are many, many alternatives available to all of us, and they're differentiated. They're not all cookie cutter, they're not all the same. So we're living in this environment of a lot of choice and a lot of open possibilities there. And again, going back to our survey, what we hear from you is that you want to be able to choose from more than one. So 68% of you said that you plan that part of your strategy, it's key to your strategy to use multiple cloud platforms. A little more detail on the right of the breakdown of that 68%. More than half of you from the total are planning on using hybrid clouds. That's not a surprise. In our definition, hybrid, combining private cloud with public cloud. The private cloud can be an internal data center hosted system, or it could be hosted at a hosting center, but it's still hardware that you've chosen and that you control and that you put a low-level software orchestration layer on. So that's how it divides out. The other telling point is that only 11% said that they're focusing only on private cloud. So we really have a multi-cloud emphasis with an overlay of a lot of usage of private cloud on top of that. And if we map that not only onto what you plan to do, but on what you have been using historically, back onto this historical CPU power under management graph, You can see a very clear story there. Those of you using single cloud, that's all we had at the beginning. Several years ago, we introduced multiple public clouds, and the consumption started to go there. And then between 12 and 18 months ago, with the introduction of our hybrid cloud support, private along with public, that's the fastest growing category. The correct way to read this graph, by the way, is that the CPU power in any shaded area is the total CPU that belongs to a company falling into that category. So if you're in the hybrid category, you may be using some private cloud and twice or 3 times as much public cloud. All of that CPU falls in that category. Because from our point of view, what's important is that your topography or your architecture of choice is hybrid. So again, that's the story around choice. And mapped onto that, we have this global choice of service provider location, right? And this is really unprecedented. If you stop and think about your ability as a customer to launch a resource in any of those yellow dots, pretty amazing. And you can launch it, we could do it from an iPad here in 10 minutes, have servers running all over the world at really low cost. That's an unprecedented capability in a number of ways in terms of delivering performance, resiliency, disaster recovery, etc. With an announcement that we had last week, we've brought the total number of public clouds that we support to 8, as well as 3 private clouds. You can see the logos, quite a variety of service providers, again, each of which differentiates their offering. The announcement last week was with Microsoft, which has been working and just announced a technology preview last week. We were part of the announcement of an infrastructure as a service API or capability on their Azure cloud. And so that gave us the possibility of having RightScale integrate with their API and manage their cloud much as we manage any other cloud, Amazon, Eucalyptus, CloudStack, etc. So that brings the total to 11 different platforms that we're supporting. By the way, as part of that Azure announcement, it's kind of a semi-secret. We're not going to publish it until early next month, but we also have a partnership with Azure and Logica to combine together to bring the system integration and consulting capabilities of Logica with the Azure cloud and RightScale worldwide. So you'll be hearing more about that in the future, but we're very excited about that. And we have partners here from Logica. If you raise your hand, if you have questions about that, you can talk to them. Now, in January, we announced a partnership with a company called Equinix, which is a data center hosting and connectivity company. And their data centers, so if you add their data centers onto this map, you get a picture that looks like this. We put them in red so they're easy to see. Look at the amount of spread that you get and the capability. What's special about Equinix is that they are able to host a private cloud right next to several public cloud providers in their facilities and connect them at basically local area network speeds at high speeds. And that kind of configuration is an interesting breakthrough because it allows hybrid cloud to communicate back and forth between servers, storage, and resources in your private cloud and public cloud resources at high speed, which solves a bunch of problems that otherwise you would face with latency and bandwidth and so on. It doesn't mean that other configurations of hybrid cloud aren't very useful for many situations, but this can actually support the kind of cloud bursting that we often hear about where you can mix and match resources more freely. Third major highlight is something that's not a sudden shift. It's a gradual shift, but it's very easy to distinguish, at least in our view of what we're seeing in the market, and it's super important, and that is that organizations' adoption of infrastructure as a service is shifting from being a tactical solution to being a corporate strategy. In other words, and to rewind a little bit, how have we seen infrastructure as a service adopted over the last 6 years? We've seen very much a bottoms-up kind of phenomenon, where individuals or departments or business managers will go out and allocate some resources and get a project done. This is often called everything from IT, shadow IT, rogue IT leakage. They all sound like kind of suspicious names. We don't believe that any of this is suspicious. We believe it's just people trying to get their work done and be productive. But nevertheless, it causes concerns in an environment where companies need to have some overview and governance of what's going on. And so what we see happening now is a very strong shift where IT organizations within larger companies are beginning to get their arms around. They have a priority to get their arms around the consumption, to make it visible, to enable it, but to still have governance and control over it. So that's a huge change. Again, going back to the survey, when we asked folks what's most important to you as a priority in managing cloud usage, we got these answers, and people could check 3, I believe. So when we later publish this with percentages, you'll see it totals over 100%. But we noted that 5 out of 6 of these items were really associated with governance and control. Provisioning, how does that relate to governance and control? Well, just having visibility into what's being used and what it's going to cost you, who's allowed to allocate resources, launch servers, allocate storage. Automation only amplifies the need for that. What kinds of workloads are running? How predictable is the way a workload launches? What are the security settings on it? Is the software on it licensed? Is it the right version? Can we support it? All those questions that are critical, really we know to the life cycle of operating software and deploying it are implied in provisioning and automation. And of course, visibility, accounting, compliance, those are pretty obviously governance issues too. So it's on everyone's mind, and it's something that has come to the forefront as a priority. So we think that companies in this context of infrastructure is the new way of doing IT. There are a plethora of options available to you, and you need to start thinking strategically about it, because everyone is starting to think strategically about it. So what's the right way to approach it? Well, we think the best way to approach this is to keep these 3 principles in mind. So on Agile IT, first one is make sure as you're thinking about infrastructure as a service that you think in terms of automation. It's a really obvious principle, but it's also really basic and really key. And it goes back to the beginning of all this. The more you automate, the more you get leverage and productivity out of something that we measure, which is the server to sysadmin ratio. It's very simply how much infrastructure can a team of X really manage effectively. And it also guarantees other good things like resiliency, predictability, etc. Scalability might mean different things to different departments, different companies. It may mean auto-scaling for a website with a lot of load. It may mean the ability to apply and update across a fleet of servers to a sysadmin. It may mean the ability to run a big batch job that runs one night and goes away to a biopharma company. But scalability in all those cases is key. And then self-service also, something that we call the IT vending machine, which is the concept that anyone within a company can go and in effect press a button and get the resources they need to run a job, right? To run an application that they need. And so self-service IT, it's an idea that's been around a long time, but it's a critical idea to think of in terms of agility and agile IT for companies that are looking to get the most out of the current context of cloud. Multi-cloud, key concept we've had for a while we call workload liberation. And what we mean by that is pretty simple. It's the idea that any workload you have, you should be able to choose among a variety of resource pools to run that on and deploy it according to your requirements. Might be cost, might be geography, might be compliance, whatever, you should have some freedom of where you deploy workloads. Hybrid cloud we talked about already. It's just a key architecture moving forward, so make sure that's part of your plan. And operational excellence across the whole fleet, from servers that you're running, compute, storage, networking on the actual service, also through the management layer, from top to bottom. You should think in terms of how can we create resiliency in a system so that downtime is minimized and performance is maximized. Finally, under control, Everything from how servers configure themselves as they're launching. Remember, this is an environment, for those of you who are new, where servers come and go pretty quickly. So you're getting a lot of launching going on, a lot of reusing resources. How do they configure themselves in a way that's predictable, in a way that conforms to the policies and best practices of your company? Monitoring, all the way from monitoring individual servers, clusters of servers, to monitoring and tracking costs, to auditing what happened, what were the key events on your infrastructure, even after that infrastructure has been relinquished or terminated. What were the key events last week on a server that's since disappeared and gone away? And then finally, governance. And governance is increasingly coming to the forefront. I was talking to a customer last night who was saying the number one issue for them was identity management. And we hear over and over, and we've done a lot of work around user management to make sure that in this brave new world where you have access to a data center in the sky of amazing proportions at the click of a button, who has access to that? Who can perform what operations, including starting, stopping, entering into a server, etc. So governance is key, and all three of these things we think should be top of mind as you're thinking about how to get the most out of the current context. So ultimately, as you might imagine, RightScale, we see ourselves as front and center in this picture of trying to deliver on this vision. We often talk about RightScale in simple terms as a bridge between the apps and workloads that companies want to run and the resource pools at the infrastructure level that they want to run them on. And so everything we do in between across the whole life cycle, from development, testing, QA, staging, production, end of life, all of that is part of the purview of RightScale as a system. And as a company, we engage across that entire purview also, from helping with strategic consulting up front as you're getting a new project going, so that the design of your system takes advantage of cloud and doesn't fall victim to any of the characteristics of cloud architectures. And then ultimately it is about the application. It's not about the infrastructure, it's not about the management system, it's about the apps that you want to run and the quickest way and the best way to get there. I saw a comment on a blog the other day that I really liked. It was just somebody's comment at the end of, I think it was the CIO of Google who was commenting on how cloud is unstoppable once again. And this person said, in relation to, I think, using solutions that others have built, he said, I think he was a startup guy, said, as a startup CEO, my biggest wish is that all my big fat competitors would continue to pour all their time and resources into DIY, do-it-yourself projects, while I focus on delivering real customer value. And I believe that delivering real customer value is probably something that we would all say we aspire to and that we're working on in our businesses. And really that question applies to any size company. What are you going to focus on as a differentiator that you can create value for? And where can you leverage the work that someone else has done in helping you to get there?